မင်္ဂလာပါခင်ဗျာကုလသမဂ္ဂလူ့အခွင့်အရေးကောင်စီကခန့်အပ်ထားတဲ့မြန်မာနိုင်ငံဆိုင်ရာကုလသမဂ္ဂအထူးကိုယ်စားလှယ် Mr. Tom Andrew နဲ့မေးမြန်းသွားမှာဖြစ်ပါတယ်အခုလက်ရှိမြန်မာနိုင်ငံမှာဖြစ်ပေါ်နေတဲ့လူ့အခွင့်အရေးချိုးဖောက်မှုတွေစစ်အာဏာသိမ်းအစိုးရရဲ့စစ်တပ်ရဲ့အကြမ်းဖက်ဖြိုခွင်းမှုတွေနဲ့ပတ်သက်ပြီးလေ့လာစောင့်ကြည့်နေတဲ့ Mr. Tom Andrew နဲ့နိုင်ငံတကာအတိုင်းအဝိုင်းကအခုလက်ရှိဖြစ်ပေါ်နေတဲ့ဖြစ်ရပ်ဒီပေါ်မှာဘလို့တုံ့ပြန်မလဲဆိုတာသူ့ရဲ့လုပ်ရက်တွေနဲ့ပတ်သက်ပြီးမေးမြန်းသွားမှာဖြစ်ပါတယ် Yes, Mr. Tom Andrew, thank you for joining with us for this interview.
Thank you very much for having me. Mingalaba.
Mingalaba. I've been looking at your activities and your speeches at the UN Human Rights Council meeting and also other international events. And you have talked already a lot about how brutal and how much human rights violation have been taken place within the country. But I want to focus in this interview more about the action and the plan that you've been initiating. And first, you've been talking about coalition of the small number of nations or limited number of nations who can put pressure on the military regime, especially to stop the current brutality on the ground. Can you please tell us how far it has gone, how many countries already involved, and what are you now? Where are you now?
Well, thank you. And first of all, I think that the foundation of any success here in overcoming the coup and the impact of the coup are the people of Myanmar. And we as an international community can provide support. We're certainly greatly inspired by the civil disobedience movement, by the fact that people all over the country are rising up in a peaceful way against this military junta. And the junta, I don't think knows what to do with this. I think that they know what to do when they confront an enemy with weapons of war, but they are at a loss what to do when they confront an enemy with weapons of peace. And this movement is really capturing the attention and the imagination, really, of many people around the world, many countries around the world. They're seeing this brutal military up against a peaceful people who are seeking only to get their freedom and restore the road to democracy and restore a sense of human rights and dignity, restore their future, their hope for the future. This is a extraordinary thing for the world to be witnessing. So that's number one. Ideally, the Security Council of the United Nations would be meeting and not only resolving, making statements, but taking action. Statements are important, yes, but they are wholly insufficient. And so the way in which I would have hoped that the Security Council could have moved forward, for example, what would be coordinated, tough economic sanctions that have the maximum impact on the junta and their economic interests, minimum negative impact on the people of Myanmar, as well as other steps, such as a global arms embargo, such as referring to the International Criminal Court so that investigations can begin and trials can get underway and those who are responsible for these atrocities could be held fully accountable. Now, at least in the short run, as we know, the Security Council has not indicated a willingness to act. So because of that, and until they are, I'm proposing that the world, those countries that are willing to stand with the people of Myanmar, coalesce together and have not just an assortment of economic sanctions or assortment of different types of arms embargo, but that there be coordinated sanctions that are tough, that are focused not just on individuals, not just on the junta, but everyone who is involved in this illegal scheme. So all those who have been appointed, all those who are taking any positions within the junta, and their families and their associates, number one would be sanctioned. But not only that, but their economic interests. So the conglomerates, MEC and MEL, and the 106 business subsidiaries and others that are under those entities. Also cutting off revenue in any other way that we can identify, such as cutting off oil and gas revenues, the Myanmar oil and gas enterprise, for example. Right now, the military, they're acting like a criminal enterprise, like gangsters. They're stealing the money that rightfully belongs to the people of Myanmar through Myanmar oil and gas. And so we're encouraging that there be a sanctions regime that cuts that flow of revenue off, as well as sanctions regimes that freeze the assets of the junta wherever it is in the world. So we know that that's occurred in the United States, for example. Assets have been frozen, approximately $1 billion US dollars worth.
Assets are frozen in the United States. Can you elaborate a bit more? How much is it, and how long are they going to freeze assets? And is there any other way around the world where they have tried to remove or transfer back to Burma?
Well, I'm not an expert. Let me start by saying that, but I'm talking to experts who advise me that first of all, the junta, they tried to get assets out of the United States. They had assets in U.S. based financial institutions in U.S. currency, U.S. dollars. So the approximately $1 billion US dollars. So the U.S. was able to act quickly to stop that from happening. So we've frozen those assets. They can't have access to them. And similar action can be taken in other countries of the world. And it's a matter of being able to trace and track those assets to see where they are, and then
they probably have
if
quite
a country will be willing to.
Singapore too, right?
I understand that they do. I don't know how much. I don't know in what currency. I don't know the details about Singapore, but Singapore comes up often as a potential area where there are assets that again that could be impacted.
You also mentioned about some kind of United Nations that are, the nations that have common interests and common willingness to act on Burma. How far has gone? How many countries have you spoken? Could you please elaborate a bit more on that?
Well, right now there are over 40 countries right now that have some form of sanctions, including the various countries of the European Union. And so we have presented, for example, the European Union with an analysis of their sanctions, the history of their sanctions, the current sanctions regime that they have, and opportunities for them to strengthen those sanctions. So they're looking at those, examining those options, and engaged in conversation within the European Union to move forward. There's been a lot of interest. We've spoken with other countries. I don't want to elaborate too much. I don't want to speak out of school, if you will. But we've been generating some strong interest, including by the United States, in this basic concept of coordinated sanctions. And I have, I've been getting. We've been reaching out to countries saying that we are here to help you and provide you with any information that you may want or could need, and we'll answer any questions. And we've been doing that. And we've also been getting some inquiries from some countries about what the options might be, what this might look like. So I'm hoping to be a resource. We propose that this be considered by countries. I think they are considering this kind of approach, and we're there to help and support them in any way.
How about is there, among this coalition of the, if you will, nations, how about the neighboring country? The Western countries are quite, not surprisingly, they're always backing the democratic movement in Burma. But how about the neighboring country, ASEAN, for example, China?
Well, you obviously this is a very, very important question, and first let's start with ASEAN. They have obviously a great deal at stake here. Myanmar, needless to say, part of the ASEAN community, and I think it is certainly a big negative for ASEAN as a whole to have a pariah state, you know, in the midst of ASEAN. That in which the economy is deteriorating, the conditions from the point of view of having stability to a partner that's going to be engaged positively, socially, economically, diplomatically. This is a major problem for ASEAN. It can't be denied. And of course, among the many issues and concerns have to be nations that are right on the border. Look at Thailand. I mean, we've known from the past that there have been enormous pressure on those bordering Myanmar when there has been the kind of violence and clashes and problems that have occurred within Myanmar. They can often show up impacting negatively neighbors, including right on the border. So there's a great deal of interest, it seems to me, that ASEAN has. And I know that there have been some countries that have been speaking out. They've been critical of what's happened. They've called for the release of political prisoners. They've been outspoken to an extent that I, frankly, am not used to seeing from ASEAN. Normally, this principle of non-interference translates into, well, I won't say anything negative at all about what's going on within your country. That's your business. That's your internal affairs. So I think we've all been kind of accustomed to this, but now to see these statements of concern and calls for the release of political prisoners, et cetera, it gives you an indication of just how concerned ASEAN countries are about what's developing in Myanmar. And I know that there's been some interest among ASEAN countries to try to engage the junta, try to have discussions so that they could maybe help to pull them back from this horrible, horrible path that they are on. So, you know, I'm hoping that ASEAN will step up to meet this great challenge, because it's in its interest to do so. Now, China, talk about a country in which they have a direct interest in not seeing Myanmar inflamed. You know, it's China. They have obviously historically have been there to protect the generals from UN Security Council action. The veto or the threatened veto is always present. They're a source of weapons to the generals. They have their Belt and Road initiatives that they are engaged in. They have economic interests at stake. So China has a great deal of self-interest involved in trying to do whatever I would think would be a positive role, take a positive role in helping to head off things getting even worse than they are right now. And believe me, they're really bad right now, but they could be worse. And so it would be in China's interest to prevent that from happening. And again, of course, we've seen some positive statements from the Security Council, presidential statement calling for the restoration of the process of movement toward democracy, opposition to the violence, the release of political prisoners. But at the same time, there has been no outright statement of opposition to the coup. And there has been no action that the Security Council has come up with. And I think part of that is because of the influence that China has, the role that China plays within the Security Council. So I'm hoping that given the statements that China has made, given the public criticism that it has voiced, despite the tradition of them not being critical, that this again indicates that they're worried, they're concerned, and that I'm hopeful that they can play some kind of a role, since they have a relationship with those involved in this outrage, that they will be able to be a force for good, a positive force moving forward, and that they will choose to exercise the position that they're in, which I think is a significant position. So we've seen some positive movement from ASEAN and China. I hope to see more.
So what you're saying is, based on your past experience, I mean, not just in Burma, but in around the world when it comes to human rights abuses by military dictatorships, the action the Burmese military has taken recently put them in the situation that nobody can defend them internationally.
That's correct. That is exactly correct. They are more and more and more isolated. And the fact that they're engaged in these atrocities, and of course, I think the evidence that even they realize how untenable their position is that they've had to make up stories. They've had to say, well, the protesters are violent. We're acting with what they described as utmost restraint to only protect security and stability within the country against these violent protests. Now, I don't know of a single person on planet Earth that thinks that has any credibility whatsoever, except maybe a small group within the junta leadership. I don't think the military believes any of that. It's just preposterous. It's outrageous. And it just shows you how completely out of touch they are with the world. But the fact that they would try to lie so grotesquely to try to cover up these atrocities means precisely that they feel uncomfortable with how they're positioning in the world. They know that what they're doing, the truth of what they're doing, is indefensible. And so they're making up stories, fabrications, to try to justify what. And I think, frankly, what they would like to see, they would like to find any evidence whatsoever to say, oh, this is not a military attacking innocent, peaceful people. This is a civil war. These are combatants, or this is us trying to confront violent people. That's all this is. Because the truth is working very much against them. The truth of people, and it's extraordinary. I mean, this entire nation rising up, this civil disobedience movement that has been so effective, so agile, creative. The young people that are out front of this, Generation Z, people are talking about this, just how powerful this peaceful army is. So there is something really, really important happening here in the country that has captured the attention and the imagination of the people of the world, and is working clearly to undermine the junta. And I frankly think that their acts of aggression, their continued outrages, these are acts of desperation. I think that they're feeling that the only way for them out is to increase the terror, increase the violence, and maybe they're thinking we can goad people into violence, and then we can justify whatever violence that we ensue, because we can just, it's Syria, right? It's a civil war. This is all this is. So, but it's not working. It's not working, and the people of the world are more and more and more supporting people on the ground in Myanmar, and this extraordinary, widespread, diverse movement. I mean, I've never seen Myanmar so unified as I've seen it now. And you gotta, if there's one thing that you can say about the generals, well, they they've unified the country. Unfortunately for them, it's all unified against them, against the junta. But it's something that is remarkable to see. And as I talk to people around the world about this, this is something that has captured people's attention.
Back to the sanction. I mean, you mentioned about particular sanction about freezing the income from the oil, and which is, of course, right now coming out to Thailand and coming out to China, and the French company involved, Thai company involved, and of course the Chinese company involved. How far it has gone? I mean, what development have you seen actually freezing these funds to the general?
I can't tell you. I don't know what steps have been taken. I've been, let me say in general terms, I've been asked for more information about what we are suggesting. I've been engaged with people that would have great expertise in the various options that can be deployed. And we're trying to convey that information to people that have questions. I can't really say much more than that, but we're trying to be a source of information to those who would like to pursue this as a potential step. They're interested in the facts. How would this work? What are the mechanisms, etc. But I'm not sure. I don't believe that that everything's been engaged at this point. I could be wrong. We're just providing information and analysis. What people do, obviously, that they need to make those judgments. But we're providing information and analysis.
Okay. And one of your main call for the international community is that not to recognize the military junta. And right now, the member of parliament who were elected in the last election in 2020, they also form the committee representing the parliament, and there is also a interim acting government. Where is the international stand? I mean, with your connection, with your talk to the individual governments, where is that situation?
That's a very good question, and there's not a clear answer that I can give you. I mean, I'm encouraging countries to not recognize in any way this junta, because it's illegitimate, and as one representative of one country described it to me, he said, this is a criminal enterprise. His words, these are gangsters. And I said, well, it's an interesting way to put this. This is obviously illegal. They're using ruthless tactics, so I can see exactly where you're coming from, how you see this. And I said, I think what's important, no matter what you call them, don't call them legitimate, and don't recognize them as such.
Sorry to interrupt. We haven't seen any country really recognizing them, right?
I have not. So this is something that we continue to talk about, and to discourage countries from recognizing them as legitimate.
And how about the CRPH, the people representing the parliament?
Well, certainly the fact that the CRPH were elected by people, they have a much more credible claim. Their claim to being legitimate is based upon the support of the people, as opposed to by virtue of having a gun and having weapons. So it's a much more legitimate claim. And I know that they're in the process of getting more organized. Of course, the big challenge, needless to say, is that so many are in detention, the leadership in detention. It's a very, very hard situation that they're in, very, very difficult conditions in which to operate in any form. But I think that they're working very, very hard. They're an incredible group of people that are stepping forward, and I've had the privilege to meet and engage with many of them. So I think they're on the right path. I think that their voices are extremely important. I think that them being engaged with countries and with governments extremely important. And I'm hoping that's going to continue.
Throughout this whole uprising, there has been a lot of appeal and call from demonstrators and people inside the country and also from the CRPH to get a UN intervention and help UN to come in. And I'm sure you have seen lots of these posters about how many dead bodies UN need to see before the intervention come in. How realistic, the people can expect from the United Nations intervention, and I want to hear your advice, your message to the people in the country.
Well, I think number one, we need to deploy strategies that we think are going to have the greatest impact, that will have the greatest chance of success, and that they be strategies that will have the potential to have the least harm to innocent people. I think that the outrage that we all feel is to see people being brutalized, innocent, peaceful protesters, even if people aren't protesting, people being shot in their own homes, point blank range. It is just outrageous. So I begin with the basic premise. Number one, we need to take action. This is unacceptable. We need the United Nations to be engaged to the extent that we can get the full engagement of the United Nations in a way that will be the most effective in overturning this atrocity and with the fewest casualties, the least harm to the people of Myanmar. I think as I've talked to many countries about the various options that might exist, I think that there is great interest in this whole notion of let us move forward to apply the kind of much tougher sanctions, much more coordinated, much more targeted, much more widespread, and use those approaches with member states of the United Nations to the extent that they can be engaged in this, working together to do this, and at the same time minimizing the damage. So even with sanctions, for example, are there ways in which we could have the most powerful sanctions possible that will hurt the bottom line of the junta, while at the same time minimizing the potential negative impact that would have on the people of Myanmar? So this framework of this, having these discussions, what can be done, what should be done, is just that: maximum impact, minimum harm. So that is where the United Nations is right now. This is where the countries that I'm engaged with, I'm talking to, that is exactly where they are. And my message to the people of Myanmar is that you have friends in the world who care a great deal about what's going on and are outraged about what is happening to you. And we want to be, the international community is seeking to be partners that is going to have the greatest impact and do the least harm. And the extraordinary approach that's being taken by the people of Myanmar in its peaceful, but nonetheless tenacious, widespread, unified opposition to this junta is very powerful. It's an extraordinary asset that is, as I say, is really captured the world. And when I talk to people around the world, I'm hearing constantly about just how clear this coup and this military regime, clearly unpopular this is, and how clearly the vast majority of people in that country are clearly opposed to it. So my message is build on that strength. Don't allow the junta to make this what it isn't. That, oh, it's just, we're trying to we're using utmost restraint to deal with violent people. That's a complete fabrication. It's a complete distortion. It's a complete lie. And they're using that distortion and that lie precisely because of the power of this nonviolent, peaceful movement, using a range of tactics, civil disobedience tactics, different approaches being deployed, people from all walks of life, all ages, all ethnicities, all religions, coming together to show and demonstrate just how wide and deep and broad that is. That is my recommendation. And what I will continue to do is push and advocate as much as I can for the world to support this movement, this peaceful movement, this powerful movement, in a way that will have even greater impact. I think we words of condemnation are fine, but they're wholly insufficient. We need action that can have the greatest impact on the junta and minimal casualties of the people of Myanmar. And that's what we need to build on. That's what we need to strengthen. And that's what I'm committed to doing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tom Andrew.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. အခုတွေ့ဆုံမေးမြန်းခဲ့တာကတော့ကုလသမဂ္ဂလူ့ခွင့်ကော်မရှင်မြန်မာနိုင်ငံဆိုင်ရာအထူးစုံစမ်းစစ်ဆေးသူ Mr. Tom Andrew နဲ့မေးမြန်းခဲ့တာဖြစ်ပါတယ်ခင်ဗျာ။